Welcome back to another episode of the Brighton Chamber Podcast. My name is Rob Johnson. So very exciting episode today. We are diving into the tech world, and joining me in studio is John Chwalibog. Welcome, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
How'd I do?
Perfect. Said the last name perfect.
Excellent. 10th time is the charm is what I've heard. So John, obviously you have a tech startup that's local here in Brighton. Pretty rare thing to see a tech company based in Brighton, which I think is fantastic. Give the listeners a brief rundown on what the company's mission is and then what services you provide.
Yeah, so VTS, we kind of have two businesses in one. One is using 3D reality capture technology to capture spaces in 3D. And then from that, we got presented with some challenges around certain asset types and property types related to telecom and critical infrastructure. And so now we've built our own app that runs on an iOS platform and a corresponding web portal to be able to capture property assets. Think about anything in kind of the critical infrastructure space, utility, telecom, using an iPhone or an iPad. And so moved from devices and cameras that cost tens of thousands of dollars to, the device in your pocket, pulling it out and getting an accurate 3D model of what that space is.
And what would be the main difference? So if someone's using, so it's similar to like a Matterport camera?
Very similar to a Matterport camera, yeah.
So it's basically a 3D rendering, basically a Matterport for anyone who hasn't seen it before. It's a camera on a tripod. It circulates in a room. You put it at different points through the room, and it puts together a digital tour.
That's right.
So the same accomplished end goal here, but with a mobile device.
A mobile device and with a different user in mind, right? So Matterport really is about that visual representation of a space and context and what that does and allows you to do. Our focused end user is more industrial engineering design based. So getting very accurate three-dimensional data, what we call a point cloud. So it's not just that visual kind of camera view that Matterport gives you. There's also that data integrity behind it, where I can drop it into CAD programs, design from it, measure accurately, all of those things. So it's just a different user in mind than like the Matterport experience would be.
What's the minimum tech requirement?
Just iPhone 12 Pro or later. I think that I'm fairly positive it was the 12 Pro that had the LiDAR sensor in it.
Yeah.
And then the corresponding iPads that have the same sensor technology.
So as long as it has the LiDAR scanner, good to go.
That's right. Yeah. So we leverage the LiDAR scanner and data and information along with some sensory information. We capture 60 frames a second video, send that off to our cloud where that all gets processed together and produces a very accurate 3D representation of the asset or property.
Now, since we're on iPhone 14, we're moving into 15. Have you noticed a betterment between 12 and 14 for the LiDAR sensor? Because I believe it's the same sensor.
Same sensor.
In all three devices, but the technology or the chip that's powering it hasn't offered any additional capabilities?
No, not really. It hasn't changed a whole lot. What is starting to change is on-device processing power. So it hasn't affected us because we still have to go to the cloud to process to get that accurate 3D representation for engineering purposes. But a lot of visual applications are kind of understanding the space quickly. As chips improve, that processing power will get moved on to device and give you kind of more of an instant view of life. But we're not there yet.
Okay. So basically all of the data that's necessary to complete the render is captured locally on the device. It's uploaded into the cloud, and the cloud takes the render because I imagine the computing power needed is much more advanced than what's on the phone.
That's right. The other thing that we do with the app too is we're trying to enable really anyone that visits these locations to be able to capture in 3D. So historically, with the more expensive technology, there's training involved. There's kind of a skill level that's involved. And we're trying to move away from that. So it's interesting. We profiled actually a hungover construction worker as our typical user. So really the driver behind that is someone that does not want to be at work today. And we said, well, if we can get that person to capture effectively to get a good result out the back end, then we've got something where anyone visiting the sites can do that. So, you think about in the telecom space, that could be maintenance or operations person from a carrier, engineering firm, contractor, and they might have zero experience in dealing with capturing things in 3D or using 3D technology. So it's really, if you can capture video and kind of follow a few prompts, you can get a really good 3D data set out the back end.
So as a startup company, what's it been like going from the stage of, okay, I have this product that I want to push into the marketplace, and then how do you make that pitch to a client? How do you find a client to make the pitch to? And what was that process like? I guess what's it like to this day?
Yeah, it's been an interesting challenge. So my career, I spent, in the 3D technology space, but more at the kind of bigger company manufacturing space. I spent 2.5 years at Matterport. So, a tech startup environment. And so for us, having the capture services piece, we were doing the work on behalf of some clients. That really helped open the door for some of these relationships with the different carriers or people in the ecosystem. So really leverage that as a stepping stone to get to users of the technology itself. So that's been strategically, it was, what we intended to do. We started as a services company to kind of learn what problems were out there, and then where could we focus a solution for a specific set of users, and then go from there.
So what's been the biggest challenge so far from startup to today?
Well, we started in 2017, so we had to live through COVID, which was, a curveball for everyone. Interestingly enough, as we got into COVID, this idea of virtually accessing sites became really important. Prior to kind of creating a digital twin of a site, people would do actual walkthroughs. So if I'm going to add telecom infrastructure, say, to a rooftop location in the city of New York, and I'm an engineer, I'd fly to New York, I'd walk that rooftop, try to understand what's there, all of those things. So COVID, we couldn't do that anymore. Engineering or, construction professionals that were bidding jobs, whatever it happened to be, couldn't travel, couldn't visit. And so it kind of forced this idea of virtual access. So we kind of got over that initial of like, okay, what's going to happen with COVID, to one of our busiest years ever because of everyone wanting that virtual access to these sites. So we kind of went from nothing to, 100 miles an hour. And there is the thing is too much growth, too fast. And we experienced that. It was a tough thing to kind of manage and get through and understand that. The other piece, probably it's been a struggle for me, being the first company we started, is just kind of the whole fundraising aspect to it, and reaching out to different VC firms and, funding mechanisms and doing the pitches and, trying to share your vision and for them to understand what you're trying to accomplish. That's been a huge learning curve for me personally.
Did you have to develop a minimum viable product in order to pitch them, or was it just the concept alone that you were pitching on?
No, concept alone to begin with. We pitched that. We had the services business, so then we had the concept of the app and portal. We did a successful friends and family raise to build a minimal viable product. Sorry, nice. And that went into beta launch last year, and we're now in a spot where we've got paid subscribers. So yeah, we were, again, having that services piece was really interesting to kind of build off of, both from a credibility and trust perspective, but also, we did have some revenue and some real customers to work with.
Yeah. I would imagine that as you're looking at the marketplace, like one thing that popped into my head was compliance, application for compliance. So I used to work at a data center, and it was completely locked down, not, limited access, right? But we'd have compliance that would need to come in and ensure that things are where we said they were, mm-hmm. right? Have you seen any application for that where you create, as you call it, a digital twin of the facility, And compliance can review it there, or is it still physical? I need to be on site to make sure we're not faking a location. There's really a dead body in server rack K.
No, that's absolutely a use case. For us specifically, no, we're not really focused in some of those aspects, and in the industries we're targeting for kind of adoption of it. But in other industries, we were involved a little bit with. So there's here in Michigan, the GLWA, the Great Lakes Water Authority. They've got a bunch of wastewater treatment plants and water plants, and for them to shut those down to kind of do those audits or walkthroughs is pretty expensive. And so they've tried to move that to kind of that virtual environment. So they don't have to limit the number of people per se. They can share a virtual link. And different teams can walk through and understand the space. And then if it's pre-construction, post-construction, whatever, those kind of things are happening. And that's starting to happen in a lot of different industries, including telecom and utilities that we're focused on.
Yeah. I'm curious. I don't, especially here on this podcast, I don't really sit down with a lot of people that have, gone the VC route and have done a proper raise before they go into the business. So I'm leaning my questions more towards this for the listening audience, because I think it's very interesting. I've been through that before. What's one of the scariest things about that process that people really don't consider when it comes to raising capital? Because it's not easy.
Scary. I don't know about scariest.
Maybe the most intimidating, or something that's like surprising, something you didn't consider.
The number of pitches that I've had to do. So we did our friends and family raise in 2020. We started to look to raise funds last year. We actually just closed out a seed round. Nice. Here in the last month. So we've been raising for about a year and a half, and I couldn't even tell you, maybe 300 pitches I've had to do. And it's kind of the same thing, over and over and over again, until you kind of get someone who's a little bit interested, and then you can start to have some very meaningful conversations. But on some level, it's pretty frustrating because, if you don't answer those kind of first 5 or 6 questions right, they're kind of just, okay, let's move on to the next one. Thanks for your time. And you kind of don't really get any feedback of, what could I have done better? Or, how could I have pitched different? Is it, those things. So that's, you don't get a lot of feedback to learn from. It's just doing it over and over again. And that's, that's probably been the hardest thing to kind of figure out and overcome.
I would imagine too, from a vision perspective, because I imagine you have this very clear vision. You know where the company needs to be. You know what it looks like at scale. And then when you meet people who don't have that same vision and they're investors, I would imagine that would get frustrating after a while. Because I know if for me, when I started the concept for this place, when I would tell a bunch of people about it and they'd be like, no one's going to use that. No one would do that. Or this doesn't make any sense. It'd be like, it'd be frustrating after a while because no one sees the vision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's, and we're kind of really focused on a certain aspect. It's not, Matterport is kind of a broader thing, right? Anyone who shops for a house or an apartment or, retail, you can kind of relate to the Matterport in mass. We're really focused on that utility kind of industrial critical infrastructure space. The other piece of it too, we were intentional about starting as a services business and then building from there. We heard a lot that was actually a mark against us. We thought it'd be a really real positive thing. We're our first best customer. We have a pathway to real customers. We have real revenue. And a lot of VCs saw it as a distraction. They didn't like the fact that we had this services business that we had to manage, and kind of keep profitable, grow, and all of those things. As a distraction to, building out the technology and getting adoption there.
So instead of being completely leveraged with debt, you went and did a ridiculous thing and started making money. How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's interesting to hear different people's feedback on what's a good idea and what's not. And I can't imagine, you've just told me it happened, so now I guess I can, but someone being like, what's a terrible idea? You trying to spend less money or leverage less debt to get this idea off the ground. Instead, no, you need to be 100% debt and, subscription focused or whatever the model is.
Yep.
It's interesting.
Yeah. It's been frustrating. Part of it was we needed revenue to help support the business. But also we really thought it was going to be a really, solid foundation to build from and viewed as a positive and definitely not. So, you live and learn and you keep moving forward. So like I said, we did just close out a successful seed round. And so, we'll carry that forward and keep plowing ahead and, hopefully have a successful Series A on the horizon at some point.
Nice. So is the goal subscription model or?
It is subscription model for the app and portal. Yep. So,
okay.
There's a monthly subscription, and then we also have what we call a per capture fee. So every time you capture something, there's an additional fee that we collect as well.
Okay. And then going to an enterprise level. So is it broken down for like small businesses as well as large corporations as well?
Yeah. The way we've developed the technology is really targeted on an enterprise level. So someone that's building out hundreds or thousands of these sites annually. So whether it's telecom or, you think about underground manhole inspections, there's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of those things. Utility poles is another one we're focused on. So you think about how many utility poles there are, not only in North America, but the planet. So we're really gearing towards that enterprise level, but again, it benefits everyone who has to kind of interact and deal with these assets in that space.
This probably already exists, and this is just a question out of ignorance, but is there a way for you to leverage like drone capturing with LiDAR so that way it kind of expands the capabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually think the ideal tech stack for the kind of industries we're focused on is a phone and a drone. It's kind of how we've catchphrased it. Obviously, you think about a tower in the telecom space. Yeah. The best way to document a tower is with a drone. And then the surrounding ground compound, inside the shelters, where the server racks are and all of that, the phone works great for that. And so you end up with kind of these two data sets that get combined into a single one. So yeah, that phone and a drone idea and capture anything in the space.
No, I like that a lot. That's awesome. So we're at 2023. So what's on the horizon? What are you looking forward to? What are you excited about?
Yeah, really now that we're kind of stabilized with the app and customers engaging with it, we're really starting to build a roadmap out around artificial intelligence and machine learning. So this idea of, after something's captured, tell me what I have. Tell me how many antennas there are, how many radios there are. So, this interpreting the digital imagery along with the three-dimensional and really giving end users the information they want. It's someone who's got to understand an existing space doesn't really care about the 3D. It's more what's there. Can I add more to it? Do I need to build out, additional support structures? So I really just want to ask the question, tell me, everything that I have and get that answer back. And so as we go forward over the next 12 months, a lot of that kind of AI, ML interpretation of the data that's collected based on users.
I love it. That's great. I'm excited to see how this continues going. I'd love to do a check-in with you on the podcast in maybe 6 months to a year and see how things are going.
Yeah, that would be great. We're excited about being local. My wife and I, when we started VTS in 2017, we've lived here for 23, 24 years. And so we really wanted to, stay home, make it local, have an impact on our community. And hopefully we can turn it into a tech hotspot, Brighton, Michigan.
I love it. I'm down with you. I'm all about bringing unique businesses to Brighton. So that sounds great. Well, John, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And, if anyone needs some more information about VTS or wants to learn about some 3D capture, you can check out our website. That's www.vtscans.com. And just really appreciate the time and the opportunity to share what we're doing.
Excellent. I love it. And we'll make sure all that's in the show notes for the listeners so they can check out all your socials, website, all that jazz.
Awesome.
All right,
appreciate it,
John. All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Chamber Podcast. I appreciate you all watching. We'll catch you on next week's show. Take care.